It has been said that average people want you to stay average. Welcome to the Breaking Average podcast, the podcast designed to challenge you to break the mold that average has on the world. Each episode offers insights directly from those who choose to break average every day. Now, for the latest insights, here are your hosts, Paul Gustafson and Mike Harbour.
Hey, welcome to the Breaking Average podcast. My name is Mike Harbour, and joining me today is my co-host, Paul Gustafson. Hey, Paul, how are you, my friend?
Mike, it is great to be with you again. I am so excited. 2021 is here, and it's pretty awesome just to be with you and our friends here just to talk about something that I think is perfect for 2021.
Yeah, this is going to be a great year. You know, 2020 was certainly challenging for all of us, and I am excited about the opportunity we're going to have to talk about this idea of cultivating courage today and how we had to all do that last year, but now we're putting that behind us, and we're really going to use that courage to kind of propel us forward into 2021 and talk about how we cultivate it in ourselves and in others. It's a perfect topic for 2021, Paul.
Yeah, you know, and I had a chance to sit down with Dave Cornell, who I would consider an expert in helping people unlock courage. And it was just great, refreshing, really, to sit down with him. We got a short interview with him. We want to kind of tee up really to encourage you, I think, all of our listeners and viewers. And he shares some strategies that you don't want to miss, guys. And also joining us, we've got Rick and Diane, and they'll help us dive deeper on this topic. One of the more important topics, I think, really to set the tone for the year and years to come.
Yeah, it's going to be great. Diane, Rick, welcome to the Breaking Average show, the new year 2021. Paul, I love that Dave is going to be joining us. He's got a website called Cultivating Courage. He's also an author, Paul, of our book, The Breaking Average, or the 7 Critical Factors to Team Strong Leadership, Breaking Average. So he's got a part in that book, and it's certainly good to have him talk about courage from his standpoint. Let's jump in and listen to this interview, and then we'll come back and have some dialogue around that. Enjoy this portion of Dave and Paul.
It's so good to be with you today. It's always a pleasure just to kind of sit down and chat with you, and you always inspire and encourage me. And I love that word, courage, or encourage. We're going to be talking about courage in our podcast, but let's unpack this a little bit more. You've got an amazing story. Share with us a little bit about your leadership journey. How did you get where you're at today?
Boy, that's a big question. So I'll try and narrow it down a little bit. Now I'll go back 10 years. I had been involved in sales management, and training and development. And in the recession back in 2010, now 21 years ago, actually January of 2010, I lost my job. And it was a time during great unemployment. My wife lost her job 13 months later. We went through all of our savings. We ended up in our mid-50s with no home, no money, and no jobs. And it was with the help of a wonderful counselor that I began to recognize the role of fear in my life and the need to become courageous, and recognizing the role of courage in leadership. And so that has been a building process for me now for the last really 11 years. I'll say really about 8 years that I've really been full force into it. It was kind of developing and cultivating over the course of those first 3 years. So that's a quick summary of kind of how I got to where I am and seeing how leadership and courage go together.
Yeah, so let me just kind of quickly unpack a little bit of what I just heard. So basically, because I think this is really relevant for a lot of our listeners, you hit rock bottom. Is that right?
Yes, without question.
You hit rock bottom. And at one point, you probably thought there was no way out, just based on some of our dialogue and what you shared just a moment ago. And it was a tough challenge. And you had to put yourself in a position like, well, I have to choose something. How can I choose courage? And was that hard, choosing courage? Was that step, that moment that you experienced, realizing I've got to find courage? Was that a rough patch for you right there?
It really was, Paul. And again, with the help of this wonderful counselor, she helped me to see how fear had been impacting my life going back to when I was a young boy, and how I made decisions based on fear. And then recognizing the first step in the journey is acknowledging that you have fear. So when I talk about fear and courage, the step number one is to name your fear. So I had to name my fear. I was diagnosed with situational depression during that time. And it was about recognizing, okay, if I'm living a life of fear, what do I need to do to overcome that? I needed to become more courageous. And there's such a parallel as well with courage and faith. And those two words kind of really gave me the impetus to start stepping out of my fear and into a life of courage and faith.
Yeah, I love that. And this element that you just mentioned, the situational depression, this is real for a lot of Americans, a lot of people around the world, isn't it? I mean, especially with COVID, I think, and I'm not a doctor, I don't pretend to be, but I did stay at a Holiday Inn Express one time. And I'd venture to say that a lot of people are going through situational depression right now. Would you agree?
I would agree wholeheartedly, Paul. And the challenge of getting out of it is, first of all, being willing to admit it, that I have situational depression, and even taking the step to go see a counselor. That, for some reason, is a real block for people to have the courage to say, I need help. And fortunately, I'd been through counseling before with my wife. And so I found the value, I'd known the value of counseling. And so for me to go and see a wonderful counselor wasn't a big step, but she helped me to see that role of fear in my life and the need to begin to step out into things courageously.
Yeah. And what's really great is that you've taken that story, that really is a journey of perseverance, learning how to cultivate courage for yourself. And now you're helping other people cultivate courage. And that's helping people, whether it's situational depression or not. We all go through tough times. We all face fears. You're helping other people face those fears. And we'll unpack that in a minute. But tell me real quick, what's one word that would describe your journey to this point?
Well, it's a word, Paul, that you and I are very familiar with: perseverance. And you've written a book about that. It's what the Breaking Average book is about. It's about just continuing on in the battle, regardless of what the challenges are that you face. And it takes courage to persevere. It takes courage to face the roadblocks and step around them, figure a way to break through them, go over them, go under them, whatever you need to do. And so I think perseverance is a great word that fits, I think, with that question.
Yeah, so cool. And really, that's the question we ask a lot of our folks that we sit down with is, what does breaking average mean to you? And so you've kind of unpacked a little bit of that. Do you want to pull that out a little bit further?
Yeah.
Is it the perseverance? What other things come to mind when you think of breaking average? What does it mean to you?
Well, I think breaking average, I've just started reading the book Who Not How, and I can't pull the statistics off the top of my head, but it was something about 85 to 90% of people live an average life. And I'm not giving the author appropriate credit into how he phrased it, but there are so many people, certainly a majority of people, I would say, I was one of them, who settled for average. And breaking average is about, there's so many things, but I'll say it's about beginning to recognize the gifts and the talents and the abilities that God has given us and stepping into them, knowing that those gifts and talents and abilities are not for us, but for the people that are around us. It's for God to work through us to make a difference in the lives of the people that we encounter every day.
Yeah, so good. Beautifully said. Well said. So with that, what type of impact do you want to leave the world with? I mean, we had this question a couple months ago asking us, do I want to be a good ancestor? I love that question. What's the kind of impact that Dave Cornell wants to make in the world?
Well, I'll say first and foremost, it comes to my family. I hope that I can lead a more courageous life so that I set an example for my kids and my grandkids to recognize that courage is something that we have an opportunity to be every day. But beyond that, my hope is to reach other people so that they can begin to recognize that they can live more than just an average life, stepping out and doing some things courageously. And it doesn't have to be a lot. Maybe it's just picking up the phone and making a phone call. Maybe it's as simple as applying for a job that you don't think that you're qualified for. And so it's just simple things that lead to more courageous lives. So it starts with my family, but then it builds out from there.
Framework that you have for this, but can you give us some guidance? How do we cultivate courage in our life?
3 steps that I talk about. Actually, there's 4 steps I talk about. The first is never underestimate the value of a crisis. The time that my wife and I went through back in 2010, 11, and 12 was a crisis time in our lives. But I can tell you today that it's one of the best things that ever happened to me, was because it helped me to recognize the role of fear in my life and the need to do something different. So recognize that when we go through difficult times, those are learning opportunities for us if we're willing to recognize that. Then when I get into the fear and courage journey, step number 1 is to name your fear. You have to acknowledge it. I say it's like being an alcoholic or a drug addict. If you're not willing to acknowledge it, you're never going to change it. Step number 2 is to frame your fear. Begin to see your fear in a different way. For me, the epiphany moment in that journey of framing my fear was the recognition that fear, the kind of fear that I had that was holding me back, fear is selfish. So if I've been given the gift of speaking and communicating and sharing my story in a way that makes a difference in people's lives, but I don't do it because I'm afraid, that's selfishness on my part. I'm withholding my story that might make a difference for somebody else. And so that was the epiphany moment for me in the journey. And then the third step is to claim your courage. It's to begin to do courageous things. It's to begin to recognize, first of all, okay, there's the fear. Now I'm going to do something different. Fear is often a default position for many of us, Paul. We experience the fear and we stay there because we're afraid to move forward. And courage is about stepping out of that fear and beginning to do something differently. And again, that might be as simple as a phone call. It might be as simple as reaching out to a counselor or a friend and saying, hey, I've got this problem and I need help. And I think one of the best first steps is to tell somebody. And then you can begin to act courage. So it's name your fear, frame your fear, and claim your courage. Those are the 3 steps that for me made a difference. And I know those 3 steps have made a difference for lots of other people as well.
Yeah, and I love that. I'm trying to wrap my mind around that, because when we can name our fear or acknowledge our fear, then we know what the enemy is, right?
Yeah.
You know, like you think about a good sports team. For them to compete well, they need to know who the opponent is. I mean, is that a lot of work to reframe the fears?
You know, it really is. For me, that was the crux of the journey. Brené Brown talks about going through the messy middle. And step number 2 for me is the messy middle, because that's where the hard work comes in. That's where I had to look internally to say, okay, what's holding me back? And really, what is that fear all about? And it was about dealing with my dad's very unexpected death when I was 14 years old. It was about recognizing messages, the negative mindset that I had, and trying to change that. And that's where all the hard work comes, is in that step 2 of reframing it. So yeah, it was tough, but it was good.
Yeah. So when you're reframing the fear, is it also changing your beliefs? Like, I mean, we got these limiting beliefs that we have, but you and I have talked about launching beliefs or lifting beliefs. Are we trying to? Are you taking time to kind of evaluate? Well, what's the beliefs that are holding me back? Because beliefs and fears kind of tie together, especially limiting beliefs.
Yeah.
And reshaping that.
Yeah. And when it comes to those limiting beliefs, it's about recognizing, okay, what of this is true? What of these perceived beliefs that I have, which of those are true? And beginning to recognize, well, No, that's not true. That's not true. That's not true. We live in a world of what ifs.
Yeah.
And so much of the limiting beliefs are, what if this happens, or what if that happens, or what if I disappoint this person, or what if, but there's another what if I do this and something amazing happens. And so it's about reframing, and it's about taking a look at those limiting beliefs and starting to create new ones.
Yeah. And that third step is, it's really a choice, right? We can choose to be courageous. It's not a feeling, it's a choice, the way that you describe it.
Yeah, Paul, that is exactly right. And, it's about recognizing, one of the things that I talk about is courage is not waiting for the fear to disappear. This isn't about becoming fearless. If you Google fearless living, I think it's 51 million things that you can look up on that. And so it's not about becoming fearless. It's about becoming courageous and stepping into your fear, oftentimes not knowing where that's going to lead. But that's what courage is.
With you, what are some ways that they can reach out to you? And you got a great book called Cultivating Courage, by the way. So,
Cultivate Courage. You can find it on Amazon.
Yep.
And you can find my website at cultivatecourage.com. There will be my phone number as well as my email address. And so I think those are the best ways to reach out. But Paul, I just want to thank you for the opportunity to be with you. I just always love what you do, and I love the team that you've put together with Mike and Rick and Diane. And I'm just grateful to have the opportunity to be a part of it today.
Thanks, Dave. Have a great day, and thanks for being a part of this.
Thank you so much, Paul. Great to be with you.
All right. Hey, Paul. Wow, that was a great interview. I love Dave. He's had his own challenges, right, within his own family this year, with his daughter, with health that they've had, plus the whole COVID issue that we've all battled this last year. But his passion for infusing courage into others is so evident. It's infectious, right? You can feel it. But breaking average without courage, Paul, is impossible. We just can't do it. We can't go to that next level without having some sort of courage. And Dave helped us knowing how to face this fear and step in with courage. You can reach out to Dave and connect more with him, learn more about him at cultivatecourage.com. We also want to invite you to help us identify other influencers like Dave. Paul, we're looking for interviews, right? And so you can go to breakingaveragepodcast.com/leader and help us identify other leaders like Dave that we can have discussion around some of our topics that we're going to talk about today as we move into next year. Paul?
And I love that too. I met Dave a few years back. There's a whole story to that, but I heard him, and I heard him share his message about courage back then, and certainly he's had some great experiences in that area in terms of really helping his family, helping others, helping me really kind of cultivate courage. Fantastic speaker, and we want to. If you meet somebody like that along life's journey and life's path, definitely go over to our website, visit us at breakingaveragepodcast.com/leader. And just let us know. We got a super simple, safe way for you to capture that and share that with us.
Yeah, well, let's dive into 2021, Paul. We've got a couple of guests with us, our friends, Diane Kane and Rick Morris, to join us in studio talking about this idea of cultivating courage from a breaking average standpoint. Diane, Rick, Happy New Year to you too. How are you doing?
Happy New Year. Glad to be back with you guys. I think I had withdrawal for a little bit.
Yeah, we had to give you some time to relax, especially Rick. He took a beating during the movie series that we did, and so it was good to, I'm sure, let him recover a little bit and get ready for 20.
Which just tells me that Mike still hasn't watched that episode.
He has not. No,
he has not watched that episode, or he wouldn't be picking on me like that. But the audience, you know what's up. You know what's going down.
I can't watch it because I gotta keep my ego in check, keep it where it needs to be.
That's it.
I tell you.
That's it.
And Paul, we have a pretty cool sponsor today, don't we?
We do. We've got a really cool sponsor, and pretty pumped about this. I don't know if Mike knows that he's the sponsor, but we've got Harbor Resources as our sponsor of our show today. And I'm pumped about it because, Mike, I hope you just pulled out my book a minute ago, which is cool. You know, our book, really, Breaking Average. But you just created a new book called the Daily Compass Quarterly Planner. I believe that's the name, for high achievers. And I had a chance to thumb through it virtually, and I can't wait to get my hand on the physical copy. There it is. Look at that.
There it is.
Guys, you got to grab a hold of this thing. It is powerful. I've used a lot of planners over the years, and the way that Mike's laid this thing out, really good. You know, quarterly planner that you can use, guys. This is something, you know, being busy does not mean being productive. We all know that. But complexity, I mean, Mike, you're right. Complexity is the enemy of achievement. So how can we simplify things down? How can we really get focused, to use Diane's word, and the stabilized, to use Rick's word? Well, you got to grab a hold of this planner. So just go to Mike's website, daily. I'm trying to get this right. It's Mike, help me out. It's a daily CQP. Is that right?
DailyCQP.com. That's right. It stands for Daily Compass Quarterly Planner.
Yeah. Go to dailycqp.com. Do it today. Grab it today. It's not too late, just because it's, you know, here we are already a couple weeks into January. Go grab it. It's not too late. Go get it. So this is, again, Mike, this is one of the best planners I've seen in a long time. Well done, my friend.
Thanks, Paul. It's been a labor of love. Like, this is a tool that I've used personally for years, called the Daily Compass tool, and I just took it and put it in a quarterly planner style with some other goal setting tools in there. But I love what you said. You know, complexity being the enemy of achievement. I'm just no farm boy, so making things simple is important. You know, I'm not a very smart guy, so the more simpler. What is that? Is that proper English? The more simpler it is,
it works in Arkansas.
The better for me, right? So that's what I've done is teach people how to say no to the wrong things, say yes to the right things on a daily basis, so they can get focused, Diane, and get those key things done to move them forward. So thanks for allowing me to be a sponsor of the show today. And I hope that tool helps many, many people. Paul, let's get started. We just heard this great interview from Dave Cornell, but let's get started. We want to talk about courage. In 2020, we had to demonstrate a lot of courage, right? We had to demonstrate a lot of courage to step through things. There was a lot of fear. I remember back at the beginning of March of 2020, when we heard the nasty word COVID or coronavirus or whatever you want to call it. You know, there was a lot of unknown during that time. My daughter was in school. My son was away at college, and no one knew, right? I mean, the way it was portrayed, it was going to ravage the world, and it certainly has in its own ways. But, you know, in that moment, right, there was a lot of fear and, oh my gosh, what's coming? Not only with the virus is it going to kill all of my family, but, you know, what about my business and all of the things that are in front of me? So we want to talk about what is courage, why does it matter? And Rick, let's just jump over to you today. What is courage in your opinion? Why does it matter in everything that we do?
Well, first, congrats on the planner. So I think we're all waiting for our copy in the mail to come. I looked the other day, mine wasn't out there, but Paul and Diane was saying thank you to you, so I assumed I just got left off the list.
If you look, Rick, I still have the not.
I can't wait to get my hands on it physically, man. But I haven't looked through
it's not published, and to be fair, nobody got a copy of it. I'm just teasing Mike. It's just be fair.
It's available now, Rick. It just hasn't shipped yet. That's an Amazon issue.
Sitting in
by the time of this recording, it will have shipped, right?
That is absolutely right.
It takes courage for Amazon to stand up to Mike Harbor like that. I can tell you that. There's a great E.E. Cummings quote that I've always loved, which is, it takes courage to grow up and become who you really are. And that term, to grow up, for me, is ageless. when we say it's time to grow up and who you really are, we have seasons in life, and we have seasons in which we have to be different ones. It reminds me that the thing that John does so well, the old story he found on the internet about, the dog and the cow and all that. And they gave some of their years, back, and the human took them all. And it was like, that's why you do this. It ends with the dog on the porch just barking at everybody who's walking on by. But to me, those are all the different seasons in life, right? There's seasons where we're exploring to find out who we become. And then there's the seasons of work where we really have to stabilize and establish our family. And then there's the season I think we're all in, which is that season of giving back. And I think we all grow up and become who we really are in every single one of these seasons in life. And so courage is allowing that change, right? And, I think all of us that are on a personal growth journey, we've had that struggle of average people wanting us to stay average. And there's people like, why are you doing that? You shouldn't do this. Why are you spending that time? Go to your cult meeting and all these different things that we hear when we're on this path. And it takes courage to want to grow. I mean, think about the courage it takes to look inside yourself, find a trait that you dislike, and make the courageous choice to change that. And that's courage. The other thing is to be able to take that step. So many people are racked in fear of the perfection trap, or racked in fear of the timing trap. Everything's got to be perfect, or everything's got to be right in line before I can take that first step. And in interviewing so many great business leaders that we've had on this podcast, and including in my personal journey, when we went out on our own, there was a different circumstance. Like, we had no choice but to jump, right? It was, company closed down, or bankruptcy was near, or whatever that thing was. But William Faulkner says, you cannot swim for new horizons until you have the courage to lose sight of the shore. And that's that fear trap of people not wanting to start a business, not wanting to start public speaking, not writing the book, is because they're holding on to the shore, right? Even in Think and Grow Rich, it says, unless you burn all bridges behind you so that there's no opportunity to retreat, will you really have the passion and courage to take your job, to take the path forward. So with all of that, the biggest thing for me is the question is, am I avoiding pain, or am I seeking growth? And really understanding that fear, and really understanding and even speaking that into the world, is what gives people the courage to start to take the next step. That's why accountability groups are so awesome, right? We really are an internal accountability group, right? We set the intention that we're going to be prepared when we come to this, and we actually meet early on Sunday mornings, before most of us go to church, and that's all intention setting and past that we're doing. But there's a propensity in this fear to really avoid pain, right? Which just means you're going to perpetuate the cycle over and over and over again. Because each time you avoid pain, you're going to get another opportunity to experience that pain versus seeking the growth to break through it. So courage is extremely important in terms of where you want to be at the end of 2021, for sure.
Yeah, so good, Rick. I love that quote you said, it takes courage to grow up and become who you really are. Everybody gets older. They don't ever really grow up, though. Some people never really grow up, right? And that's where courage comes in. It's the courage to grow up, not just get older. Stepping through and dealing with the things that we need to deal with. I know a lot of people, I'm sure you do too. There's a lot of people that are older around you, but they're not really mature yet. They haven't grown up yet. They're still like dealing with things as a child would, or as a teenager would, right? And so I love what you said, Rick, about it takes courage to be able to do that. Paul, how about you? What is courage, in your opinion? Why does it matter?
I love this topic. I really do. We talked to open up the season this year, 2021. We talked about strengths last time, and here we're talking about courage. I think they're paired together nicely, right? I'm a person of faith that says to be strong and courageous. Well, we talked about strengths being strong, courageous. What's it mean to be courageous? I love Rick's take on what he shared just a moment ago. It's a great quote by E. Cummings that mentioned in Faulkner. And, if you ever get a chance to talk to Gloria Burgess, she's got some great stories of Faulkner as well, right? And so I think that ties in perfectly. And Rick, that comment you made, asking that question, that really decision point, is something that I'm going to add to my toolbox. Am I avoiding pain or am I seeking growth? Because a lot of times I have fears, guys. I don't know about you, but I've got fears. And like for me, the fear of process, the fear of all the work that has to be done, sometimes I just let that stop me and I have to go through that. And the more I think about that fear, the more it stops me. And so it's really interesting. And you know, certainly I don't think courage means that there's a lack of fear. And we'll talk about that in a minute. But really, when you think about courage, it's about getting out of our comfort zone. It's stepping over that line of intentionality. It's probably, and I think it is, it's whispering to ourselves, I can do it. I can do it. And I think that's important for us, you know, the little train that could, right? It's sort of that approach. It's finding that way, that quiet voice. Actually, it's finding a way to quiet that voice of inhibition, because there are voices that we have, whether internal or external, that stop us. And we've got to find a way to say, okay, I hear you. You're noise to me. I hear you. And maybe it's a yellow light, you know, giving you some caution, because I think fear, that's what it is. It's not a red light, it's a yellow light. And it's just saying, hey, be aware. Here's what you've got. And I like how Dave talks about naming that fear. That approach is really important, I think, because once you name that fear, then we can quiet them down a little bit. But the reason courage matters, Mike, is because I think we're born to be courageous. That's our intent in life. When we were born, we stretched ourselves to grow. We stretched ourselves to stand up in the crib, to walk, all those things. And at some point in time, we kind of pull back from that. You know, we were courageous in our creativity when we were younger. At some point, we pull back from that. No, don't pull back. Continue to be courageous. Each new day requires courage. Step forward in courage. And that's why I just love this topic.
Yes, good. I love what you said, Paul. We were born to be courageous, right? I mean, I think it's wired in us. It's in our DNA to step into that or retreat from it, right? Retreat from it. Diane, I'm sure you've got some things to add from a different perspective. How about you?
All of the things, right? So we were looking for quotes, and I've got this. I've had this on my desk for a really long time because it took courage for me to make a change, right? Rick, you were talking about those decisions and moving forward. So it says courage, fear transformed by faith, adversity reborn as strength. And, you know, this is where it sits right there. And I found that at a time where I made a really courageous decision to end my marriage. And it was something that I didn't take lightly, you know, and we talk about those fears. So it was the fear of how to go forward. It was the fear of being alone. It was the fear of not meeting up to all of those expectations that you had when you said "I do" at the altar. And it was also a fear of being a single mom. And when I saw that, you know, I took that step in faith, not something that I really wanted to do, but the adversity that was reborn as a strength that was there. It was that adversity that made me step forward in standing in my values and showing what needed to happen for my girls. And, you know, Paul, you were talking about being strong and courageous and the faith that it takes. So courage is it's a combination of all of those things. It's really taking just that step and overcoming that fear, taking that next step forward. In every day we get to be courageous over and over and over again. And, you know, you get to go up, and today might not have been a good day, but we get to do it again. You know, we're all being courageous, standing here and having these conversations and putting a podcast together. We don't know if anybody's listening to us. I think we know that they are, but, you know, if one person listens to what we're doing and they can get a nugget out of this, and we've encouraged someone to be courageous today, then we've done our job.
Yeah, that's so good. I think, you know, we could go a lot of different directions with this, but, you know, Paul, you mentioned something about, you know, courage is kind of wired into us, right? It's in our DNA. We all have this desire to be a hero, right? It's like, well, it's why we all love superhero movies, right? We like to watch them, or we like these movies like Braveheart or, Gladiator or even 42, where there was a hero in that movie as well, right? We all have this desire to be a hero. I think of guys like Eric Liddell, who wouldn't run on Sundays during the Olympics, right? I think of David from biblical times who stepped in to be a hero. We know no one else around them, right? We know no one else around them. Or who was the guy? Man, I can't even think of his name now. He just passed away within the last few weeks, broke the sound barrier. Paul, you probably know, you get the name on the end of your tongue, I'm sure, just like I did.
Was it
Yeager?
Chuck Yeager? I didn't know.
Chuck Yeager. He just passed away. Yeah, like 3 weeks ago, before the end of 2020. But he broke the sound barrier. And what a courageous guy, right? I mean, who knows if your body's going to explode when you start going that fast or what, right? And the courage it takes to be an astronaut, to strap yourself into a seat and be blasted on basically a nuclear weapon from Earth into space. I mean, what courage is taken there. And all of us have that. We're drawn to that, right? We know the heroes. Courage allows us to have our own hero story. And, I love John Wayne's quote. He says, courage is being scared to death, but saddling up anyway. And, I think of many, many times in my life where I've just had to, okay, let's saddle up. Let's get in the saddle. So it's our ability to kind of experience that fear, like the astronauts, maybe like Chuck Yeager, like Eric Liddell, face it head on and then see a future that could be better, right? We don't know if it's better, but it could be better. Get that so clearly in our mind that it drives out the fear. Race car drivers are trained to drive through the smoke. When there's a wreck in front of them, they don't put on their brake. They put their foot on the gas and drive faster through the smoke. That's what they're trained to do, to drive through that fear, something they can't see, in order to get a clear runway, a clear path in front of them. And I just love, that's why courage is so important. It allows us to experience something on the other side that we can't see now. And I think that's why courage is so important for us. And every time we experience it, we just got to pull our own, John Wayne, and saddle up anyway, boys and girls, let's go. Right. So how do we cultivate this courage in others? I think this is important too. As leaders, we're talking about breaking average, right? And in the book Breaking Average, Paul, I'd love for you to kind of reference the story in the beginning when we come to you, is how we cultivate this courage in others that maybe don't have a belief in themselves. Rick, what are your thoughts on that?
Well, first, you just brought up the space travel, and it always reminds me of a great Armageddon quote. You're like, you don't know if your body's going to explode. But Rockhound, as they're getting strapped in and they're about to take off, he says, we're sitting on 4 million pounds of fuel, one nuclear weapon, and a thing that has 270,000 moving parts, all built by the lowest bidder. Kind of makes you feel good, doesn't it? Love that quote. Love that quote. But we keep talking about fear as an antidote to courage, or fear is the anti to courage. But fear can be bad for us too, right? If you think about even like a scuba diver, if you get fearful, right, fear can cause you to breathe too fast, or swim too hard, or move too suddenly, or fail to take note of your surroundings, and rise too quickly to the surface, all which can be very dangerous to you. So there's the control of fear is a courageous thing, but fear can be good and bad for us, right? It can be really good or bad for us. And what's interesting is knowing the difference between whether this fear is good or bad. And one of my favorite things to do in coaching is when I'm asking for reasons why they're not doing something, or reasons for why they don't want to start the business venture or make the courageous decision to maybe split from a toxic relationship. They're always like, what if this and what if this? And my question back as a coach is, right, so what if? Play it out. Tell me what happens. Right. And really, most of the fear is unknown. It's like so even then, one of the greatest things that you can do to start to develop courage is, before you take that step in, and it goes along the lines, Paul, of naming fears, as Dave says, but is to write down all the things that you think are going to happen before you before you do it, and then go do it. Then come back and read what actually happened. And you're going to realize that you were thinking way worse than the things that would happen. Very few times does the actual result worse than what you thought it was going in. Very few times, especially if there's a lot of fear around it. That fear is really holding you back. But I think the biggest aha moment I have is happened during this podcast. And Paul, you said it. You said the word encourage. Mm-hmm. And I was like, well, that's interesting. We're talking about courage and how do we transfer courage and how do we give it to others? And it's through encourage. But within the word encouragement, right, is the word courage, which means the ability to face danger and deal with it. But to encourage then is to develop that ability in someone, while the meant portion at the end means that turns development into a noun, which is the act of giving courage or support to one another, which leads me to one of my favorite stories. In one of the coolest things that we have the ability to do and being John Maxwell team members is sometimes we get to see that creative process that John goes through, like live, like we see something happen and 2 years later, it's in a book. And I remember sitting there in the alumni session, and Mark Cole, who's now the president of all the companies, was talking about the fear of having to go meet with the president of a country representing the John Maxwell team. And John just had this moment, and he's looking at Linda, did you write it down? Did you write it down? Right? But he had this moment and he was like, no, what I did is I lent you the courage in order to go do that, right? I lent that to you and you repaid me by doing a phenomenal job and now developing the ability to do that within yourself, right? So in a way, when we're giving encouragement, we're lending our courage to that person to let them know it's going to be okay. And they can repay us by coming out the other side and realizing it wasn't as bad.
That's so good. I mean, what a great leadership principle there. That we all need to learn from, right? Giving someone the ability to go fail actually lends them courage, right? When we demonstrate that we have that, that courage to do that and the belief in them. That's so good, Rick. Thanks for reminding us of that. I remember that story as well, but you reminded me of it, and I need to do more of that myself, right? To lend others my courage in them. Paul, I know you like to talk about this. I know you like to inspire others or encourage others, but talk to us about, developing this idea of courage in others.
Yeah, I think this is what matters most, right? This is what matters most. And I love what Rick just shared. And I wrote down a few thoughts as you guys are, I've already filled out a piece of paper here. I usually only fill out maybe 2/3 of a piece of paper. I've already filled out the whole piece. And I put the word story down and I put the word history down, right? Rick said, we hear these things. It's really the challenge to be courageous. And then 2 years later, we read the story about it. And I wrote down, wow, every great story has one common denominator: courage. Every great story has one common denominator: courage. And so if we're going to make 2021 the best year of our life, we've got to step forward in courage. We're going to create some stories, and they all require courage. And I think this is my favorite part of our podcast, when we ask the question, how do we transfer it? And Rick, you're spot on. Encourage is a powerful word. And the way I think of it is encourage means to pour courage into. And we have that opportunity to do that, every one of us. And so I love what Dave talks about, naming our fears. I think that's important. We've already mentioned that, but we can also name our strengths. What are our strengths? And we can do it for ourselves, but we can do it for other people. That's a way to encourage others, right? So we can remind people of their strengths and their qualities, maybe remind them of their hope, because we all have hope. I know people say hope is not a strategy. Sorry, hope is a strategy. It's the starting point of all strategy. If you don't have hope, then you can't even have a strategy that follows. You've got to have a little bit of hope. And we can pour courage into other people. We can identify what their strengths are. We can cultivate that courage, as Dave talks about, by maybe walking with them, maybe whispering words of affirmation in them. And courage, again, is to pour courage into. I like how Les Brown does this. I don't know if you've ever seen him do this, where somebody introduces their name and he's creating really a powerful He's setting the stage for that individual so that they know what they offer and that the rest of the world knows what they offer. Right.
Mhm.
It's so powerful where he could take a name like Mike and say, Mike, you are a powerful mentor. You are influential. You are knowledgeable, and you are engaging and empowering in other lives. And he used every letter of Mike's name. He could do that with Rick. Rick, you are radiant. You're joyful and radiant, man. You are imaginative. And I'm using words that are actually true of that person, by the way.
Mhm.
Right? These are powerful. Rick, you're radiant, you're imaginative, you're courageous and creative, you're caring, you're comedic, and you're a great communicator. You got lots of C's to your name, man. You're kind. You are a knight. You're a knight of service. I've seen you do this before. You are a server, and you are a knight of service. I love that. Diane, you are devoted. I love your devotion that you have for folks. You are insightful. You are affirming and assuring and amusing. You're very amusing, and you're aware. I love your awareness. You got lots of A's to your name, so you get the A's. And as far as you never say never. You're a go-getter, and I love that about you. And you're an encourager. That's the final letter, E. So I'm just using the letters there. It's a great, powerful tool. You can do it for yourself. You can allow someone else to speak that into you, but you can speak that into other people. And that's a way to pour courage into somebody else. So, and it's this idea of launching beliefs. We've got limiting beliefs. Let's give people some launching beliefs, things that lift them up. So those are some thoughts. Mike,
I love that.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's good. I love that idea of launching beliefs, I think it was Martinelli he used to say, just borrow my belief in you, right? If you don't believe in yourself, borrow my belief in you. And that's what those launching beliefs are. Hey, I believe in you. I'm going to launch you. Here's some of those launching beliefs. Now you go do it. And I stand behind you, ready when you need me. Diane, add from your perspective how we can really inspire and cultivate this courage in the lives of others.
And everything. And Paul, I love how you brought, thank you for affirming all of us this morning and for bringing that to us, because I remember standing in the room in a John Maxwell moment, right? And being in front of Les and him doing exactly that as you were getting ready to stand up for the first time and use your voice. And I think when we're talking about transferring it to others, we don't always recognize our strengths and affirming those strengths like you just did for us in somebody else. We can't always see where our strengths are. And so when we're seeing it, making sure that we're providing that opportunity to bring that strength forward, and making sure that we're creating a safe space for somebody to do that, especially when we're talking about leading others and giving others opportunity. Rick, your story about Mark and John was a perfect example, because Mark was stepping into something that was totally new to him. He had watched John all this time, but now here he is taking center stage. And so we as leaders get to do that for people that we're working with and other peers, just making sure that we're giving them, affirming the strength that we saw in them, reminding them that they have the ability to do that, but being that safety net for them right next to them, and allowing them to fail and helping them overcome what they appear to be a failure instead of a learning opportunity. I think those are the important things to just keep reminding them to stretch. And we always need someone to go along with us. I think it was Henry Cloud that has the power of the other. We always need somebody to be around us. So as a leader, we're that safety net, we're that encourager, and we're that voice of just take one more step every single time that they need it. So to be that encourager for them.
That's good. I love that, Dan. Have others around you, right? I think it's so important. I was thinking of that earlier when Paul or Rick were speaking as well. It's important in order to have courage. You need to be encouraged as well, and that requires you to be around people who maybe have a little bit more than you, right? If there's an old saying, you'll become like the 5 people closest to you, right? If you hang around with people who are afraid, you're gonna have even more fear, right? If you listen to things, I mean, this last year with 2020 and the whole COVID and coronavirus stuff, I mean, you can listen to that stuff all day and just get fearful, right? And never move, never want to go outside, never want to be around anyone else again. And it's very, very important that you're around people who have courage. And look, it's not about not being safe. It's just about having courage enough to step out of your comfort zone and do things. And so I think for me as leaders, the way to cultivate this is number one, I've got to go the way, right? I've got to be willing to go, even if I'm afraid. I think of a movie that was a great movie that we talked about during our movie selection back in 2020. We Were Soldiers Once and Young, and it portrayed the story of Hal Moore during the Vietnam War. And there's a scene in there where Mel Gibson's playing him, where he's literally walking up and down the berm while bullets are flying, right? What courage that took. But the reason he was doing that is he needed to go the way, right? He needed to go before his troops because he needed his troops to have courage to fight and not hunker down and not do anything and be overrun, right? He knew that was the way. So as leaders, we have to know the way. And then we have to go the way, right? We have to know the way, show the way, and then go the way. And but I think it also begins with authenticity. Like we have to be willing to say, hey, I'm scared, but I'm going to do it anyway. I'm scared. I don't know what's going to be on the other side of this, but I know I have more fear staying where I'm at than moving through that smoke and not knowing what's on the other side, right? So I think as a leader, it's okay to be authentic in that and transparent. And yes, I have fears, but I'm going to let my courage pace me and move me forward so that I can saddle up and go the way. And that's kind of what I think about that, and how we cultivate that in others. Any final thoughts? One of you want to add to that before we move on to our tip and challenge portion of the show?
Yeah, actually, you reminded me when you were talking about heroes, and everybody wants to be a hero. And this is just a technique I use all the time in terms of crisis when I'm having to deal with customer service or deal with an issue. But I asked that person to be the hero of my story, and basically trying to give them the courage to take the action that's going to solve. But what I tell them is like, look, I'm going to get through this. I'm going to finish this. I'm going to get the result that I want. And there's going to be a story that I can tell. The question is Mike, are you going to be the hero of that story? Are you going to be the person that makes the courageous choice to fix what needs to be fixing? And I'm telling you, the results I get from that is phenomenal. And then I tell the story in podcasts or other stuff. But, when somebody finally, when you're getting that stonewall, like, well, you got to call corporate or you got to get the 800. No, you don't understand. I'm going to get to that side over there. The question is, are you going to be the hero of the story or somebody else going to make that choice? But it's a great technique to not only calm yourself, but to give the other person the courage to act and get things done.
Yeah, I love that, Rick. I'm gonna borrow that idea from you.
Right.
Reminds me of a book that Paul and I have kind of gone through recently, Never Split the Difference, right? And the negotiation techniques in that. It's a fantastic book if y'all haven't read it. But yeah, I love that story, Rick. Thanks for sharing that. Paul, it's time to close out our podcast. First of all, I want to thank Dave Cornell for being a portion of our show today, sharing his courageous story and ideas about calling out the fear. I want to thank Diane and Rick. Again, Happy New Year to you. This is a great way to start the new year. I'm excited about where the Breaking Average podcast and the Empowered Living Show even is going in 2021. We've got some big plans. We've got those lined out, and we're looking forward to sharing that time with you, Diane and Rick. And thanks for joining us this morning. Paul, let's dive into the tip and challenge. I'm going to let you go first today so I can steal your thunder after you're done. Yeah. How about it, my friend?
Oh, yeah, this has been good. I've got a lot of notes written down, but I just want to, there's a lot of good tips that we've shared today, and I would encourage folks, the one tip that I have for you is, look, don't let fear stop you. I met, and I've shared this before, it's such a profound statement that he has made. It's Red McDaniel, POW in Vietnam, 6.5 years in the Hanoi Hilton. How did he survive that? And he would tell you there's a couple of things that made him survive. And first of all, he would tell you that you have courage. We all have courage. We have a tank of courage is how I would put it. And we just have to pull from that, and that source is through faith and things of that sort. But he tells it this way. He says, courage is not the absence of fear. It's the presence of faith. It's not the absence of fear. It's the presence of faith. So step forward, knowing that, you know what, I'm going to be able to make that next step. I'm going to be able to go further. You've been able to get to this point in your life anyhow, as it is, through courage. So therefore you can step forward and courage. So be courageous. It's a decision. It's not a feeling. It's an act. Take that step. Now, the challenge is this, not only for yourself, but you get to encourage, as Rick talked about earlier, we get to pour courage into other people. So what can you do to encourage somebody else? I would recommend this. Here's my challenge to you. Identify 5, maybe 10 people in your circle that you need to pour courage into, and write down what their qualities are. You know, I used the letters of their name a moment ago to talk about Rick, Diane, and Mike, but you can do that with your 5 or 10 and just identify some qualities and just be ready with those. You don't have to use them all. Just every now and then, plant that seed, that launching belief in somebody else. That's your challenge, is to plant launching beliefs in other people. True things about them that will give them the courage that they need despite the fear that they feel. So how about you, Mike? What's your tip and challenge?
Yeah, it's good, Paul. Thank you for that. I'll try to practice that. I don't know if I can do 10. Man, that seems like a lot, right? 10 people. I got to encourage.
You can do it, Mike.
All right, just start with one, Mike. Just start with one.
All right, one. I'll find one. No, that's so good. So my tip, Paul, is this, and I've mentioned this multiple times during today's episode. When you experience fear or doubt, drive through the smoke. Just drive through it anyway, right? Write down, and one of the ways to do this is to write down what you want, create the clarity on the other side, right? You've got to have a vision for a better future. So in that analogy of the race car driver, they know what's on the other side, that it's clarity, right? The finish line is on the other side of that smoke. So you've got to know what's on the other side for you. Write that down with clarity so that you're able to push through and drive through it. And here's my challenge. There's a couple things I want you to go watch. One is a movie called We Bought a Zoo. It's got Matt Damon, who's, one of my favorite actors. It's a cool little family movie. If you've not seen it, I recommend you do that. But his character is Benjamin Mee. And there's a quote from that movie that I love. It says, sometimes all you need is 20 seconds of insane courage. Just literally 20 seconds of just embarrassing bravery. And I promise you something great will come of it. And that's literally all it takes. I think back to when I started speaking. I've been speaking in public for years and years. But when I started speaking in public for pay, like asking people to give me money, I had this fear that came over me. Like when I was doing it for free, when I wasn't asking for money, it was easy. But now all of a sudden I'm asking people to pay me. And I had this immense amount of fear that come over me. Right. But once I took that 20 seconds of courage, those first 20 seconds I spoke, all the fear went away, right? It was just getting started. And now, I get paid a lot of money to speak and teach and train people. So it's been fantastic. But so I want to encourage you to go watch that movie. One's a great little family movie. 2, just listen for that quote. And then there's a second thing I want you to do. And Rick, I'd love for you to put in the show notes, the link to this TEDx speech. It's by a martial artist, Sensei Nadine Champion, and that's her name. But she wrote a book called 10 Seconds of Courage, Life Lessons of a Fighter. And, she's a female Taekwondo karate artist, right? And a fighter. And when you look at her, Diane, you'd love her speech. When you look at her, she doesn't look like a fighter. She's not, I'm not talking about, she's not a UFC fighter. Some of the females on UFC, I'm like, I'm not getting in the ring with them, man. But, she doesn't look like that. Right. But it's a great story. And I want to challenge you all. It's about a 17-minute TEDx talk. She talks about what we need to change. I'm not going to give that to you. I want you to go listen to that talk. But what do we need to change in order to have that 10 seconds of courage in our life to really grow? Paul, that's my tip and challenge today.
That's good. I can't wait to watch that. I love TED Talks. Hey, we want to thank our sponsor, Mr. Mike Harbor of today's show. Again, he's got a great new planner out there. So Harbor Resources, go visit dailycqp.com and grab this planner. It is a fantastic tool. It will be something that you can use, a tool to help you find courage, leverage courage, and make that impact and create a new story and give you that 10 seconds of courage. So if you want to be featured and highlighted on the show as a sponsor, we are certainly open to that. We want to add value to other people. If you have a resource, if you have a message to share and some element that you want us to reflect as a sponsor, let us know. Communicate with us. Just visit our website, breakingaveragepodcast.com. We would love to hear from you and discuss how we can make this mutually beneficial. So again, this is exciting discussion, Courage. I'm glad we're doing this, Mike, and I'll let you land the plane.
Yeah, thanks, Paul. Thanks for allowing me to be a sponsor of today's episode on the Breaking Average podcast. Go get your copy of the Daily Compass Quarterly Planner. It's a daily courage tool, Paul. I mean, literally for me, what I have to do is I'll write down my prospects that I'm going to call on every day, right? And sometimes that takes courage to call someone up and say, hey, spend money with me. So it's a daily courage tool as well. I hope you'll get a copy of that. And Paul, today, I love starting out the new year with courage, because sometimes that's what it takes to say, okay, I'm going to let last year go. I'm going to let all the things of the past go. And I'm going to step into this with courage and faith and make this my greatest year ever. So it's a great topic once again on the Breaking Average podcast. I'm inspired by our mission of leadership and pushing others to break average in their own lives and leadership. We hope you'll join us on the next episode of the Breaking Average podcast.
Thank you for listening to the Breaking Average podcast. If you loved what you heard, please take a moment to subscribe. All opinions and comments expressed in this podcast are those of the participants and do not reflect the opinions or views of any of the advertisers, producers, or platforms. This show was produced by R Squared Multimedia. A special thank you to Milestone Melodies for our theme music. As you continue your day, what is one action that you can apply from this podcast to your life? Tune in for our next episode as we continue to challenge everyone to break average.